Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Maya Jabber, and I am a social entrepreneur with expertise in business strategy and sustainability. My background is within the design build industry originally, and then I moved into more looking at sustainability, ESG within organizations, as well as building and transforming organizations to be agile and looking at process improvements holistically.
Hi, I'm Robinder Singh. I'm a investor relations and ESG professional. I've put in now close to 35 years of practice, having worked both in India and overseas with multiple industries, including in my last role in a chemical company, but I worked across the energy chain, upstream, downstream, and also in financial services earlier on. So what I now do is to consult with medium, large, and small companies aspiring to up the game in ESG with an intent of enhancing valuations and hopefully getting better fair value that reflects the value of attention to ESG.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anu Chaudhary, and I have been working in the ESG and climate action space for over 21 years now. And I've literally worked on all sides of the table with, including the United Nations, the Gold Standard Foundation, accreditation and certification bodies, policymakers and standards bodies, and then on the corporate side as well. And now I'm working as a consultant and advisor through my Sustain Plus. So I founded Sustain Plus in 2016, and we've been working with a number of corporates, mainly large industries in diverse sectors across the globe, helping them with their ESG goals, with their strategies, implementation of some solutions to achieve their targets, and their carbon neutrality or other environmental targets. So I'm very happy to be here with my elite panelists, Robinder Singh and Dr. Maya. So, Dr. Maya, let's start with you. How important is ESG for a startup? Does it make sense for them to start looking into it from the word go? Well, I would love to hear your thoughts. And Mr. Singh, after that.
Yeah, I think it is so important for any form of startup to start putting ESG into their business plans and building their strategies. Because ultimately, when you're looking at ESG, you're looking at the environmental footprint. So from procurement, where you're renting your facilities, your spaces, and what is that footprint that you're trying to create. From the S part is really how you're treating from your D&I and how you're treating your people and what kind of policies you're putting in, and your overall governance of how you're going to be running your organization and what that means to you. So those foundations need to be built into any business plan, any business strategies, and how you're going to market yourself. All of that and your messaging is encompassed into an ESG philosophy. So if you don't have that originally within a business plan and how you're building your foundations of your firm, then it's going to be so much harder. And that's where companies now are facing, how do they change that culture? If you build that culture initially, it'll be a much easier go. And within the market now, where from your consumers, your employees and everybody else is asking for these things that are built into these philosophies. So I think it's extremely important to start at the go.
I think the key here is that if you're looking for success, which every organization is, if you're looking for sustained performance, which every organization is, if you're looking to become not just a first generation, but a second and a third generation organization, which means that you're going to be around for an extended period of time, if you're looking to be a leader in your business area, and if you're looking, in order to be a leader, be best in class in what you do, be able to attract the right kind of talent, be able to attract the right kind of investors. If you're going to have, if these are part of your desired elements as you enter into a startup organization, you have no choice but to start investing in ESG. Develop an organization and then have to re-engineer what you've done. That said, there is a very, very easy business case around investments in ESG with, in some cases, the ROI is just as less as 1 year. So you're going to recover whatever incremental investments you're going to make into ESG, which you will need to make. but you will recover them very rapidly. So the business case is so compelling that including it in your business plan just makes more sense.
So what we are observing now is that ESG is no more considered a philanthropic effort. It's no more considered as something good to have, but rather something which is essential for the survival of a business. While the larger corporations have become much more conscious of this fact, the reality is that startups still consider profits and finances on top of their priorities for the right reasons, of course. I think where the gap lies is, it's in the understanding that ESG is not related or is not directly linked to business, and that is something that needs to be changed.
Look, I'll give you, very, very simple areas where, on the E front, for instance, what we do in manufacturing organizations, large, small, medium, really doesn't matter. You're going to create warehouses, you're going to create factories, you're going to use energy to run those factories, to light it up, and so on and so forth. I mean, in today's day and age, LED is a much cleaner energy source. It's a much lower consumption source, and it does require a higher investment than, let's say, a CFL or a traditional, source of lighting. That investment can be recovered in less than 1 year. So you can imagine the financial impact of something as simple as deciding what kind of lighting I want in my factory, in my work areas. That's just one simple example. I've just come in from a chemicals background. In the chemical industry, you use water extensively. So your ability to reduce your water consumption through very elementary investments, again with ROIs of 1 year, 2 years, in some instance 3 years. But even so, these investments go a long way in making in actually compressing your operating costs significantly. Investments in ESG, on the other hand, demonstrated investments in ESG will get you incremental benefit on your capital cost. Your cost of capital on your borrowing can come down by between 50 to 150 basis points, depending on who you are and where you are borrowing that money from. But there are now banks and other financial institutions that are wanting to lend specifically to companies that have created separate pools of money that are earmarked for companies that are ESG practitioners, and they're willing to lend that at a lower cost than what they would lend to other non-ESG compliant companies. So your cost of borrowing can be immediately impacted, which is great for a startup, because the lower your cost of borrowing, the lower your operating cost, makes you that much more competitive out there in the marketplace. So that's what you want to do. Increasingly, potential employees want to work for organizations that believe and have ESG as part of the DNA. So your cost of acquisition of employees and cost of retention of employees will come down. So every element of business, whether from an operations point of view, whether from a financials point of view, whether from an employee point of view, there are clear measurable, if you like, indicators where you can measure year-on-year improvement in your cost structures. So that's on the cost side. Now you look at on the positive side, on the revenue side. Increasingly, companies that you sell to, I come from a B2B background. Companies want to deal with companies that are ESG compliant and are willing to pay. In some instances, are actually willing to pay a price for that as well, because that helps them in their scope 1, scope 2, sustainability measures as well. So there is a very clear, if you like, marriage of like-mindedness happening out there. And so sooner you get into it, the better off you are, and the more likely you are to then be able to deal with organizations that are already practicing and investing in ESG. because they also want to deal with suppliers who are doing the same thing. So if you want to be a supplier of choice, then you have to be ESG compliant. So in every aspect of the business, whether it is about the marketing and the business development part, whether in the regulatory framework, so increasingly regulators, governments are becoming more and more answerable, if you like, to their public. So they want to make sure that you have regulations which are more stringent than before, but are also more people friendly. And doing that is going to make you part of that regulatory framework. So it's cost of doing business, it's cost of getting business, it's cost of getting employees, it's cost of funding, its ability or license to do business. All of these in some form or fashion actually do get impacted positively with investments made in ESG, which in itself have a very very well definable ROI. So that's why I said the business case is very compelling to anybody to want to make that investment. That said, it requires very clear top-down mandates. It requires very clear top-down appreciation, but also acceptance of the fact that you want to do it, because then you drive that culture down through the organization and make it an integral part of the DNA of the organization. And that's where people like Dr. Maya, yourselves, ourselves, we are all happy to help in any way which we can to help educate people who are less aware. This is not a very easily acquirable talent. So there is the benefit of organizations like yourselves and service providers like yourselves who can shorten that learning curve for the sake of the organizations.
And I think that is the one thing which is perhaps that's the missing link right now. As an organization evolves and as they understand more about ESG, there is no turning back from there, because by then they have already started seeing tangible benefits out of doing ESG. It's just the first step, I guess, which takes the longest it seems like most challenging. One, because it is overwhelming for an organization to even understand the concept, and two, because it's a universe. So ESG is essentially everything within an organization.
I would just like to say that we're talking about startups here, and these are people who are just starting to put their business plan together, their whole process of how they're going to do things together. And when you're looking at ESG, it's about looking at human centricity and looking at systems. You need to have both of those working within your overall operations. So as a startup, it's starting to look at how your process is going to go and how you're going to work with each other. When you're looking at sustainability overall, business sustainability, or looking at ESG helps build agility and innovation into your organization because it builds collaboration and the necessity of working together. I don't believe it's only a top-down. That does not work. It has to be a top-down, bottom-up, collaborative engagement holistically with everybody within the organization that will believe within the messaging. And as you're building your startup, it is that messaging and that belief where ESG, or the philosophies of environmental social governance, needs to be built into your messaging and in everything that you do. So it's starting to think how to put those together within your startup to then be able to go and communicate to investors and say, here's what I have, here's where we are, here's how I think about my employees and what I'm going to do for them. Here's how I'm going to tackle, with supply chain, who you're going to go after. So these are things are going to be very important within a startup to start looking at these things and building them within your overall strategy.
Yeah, very interesting that you mentioned about the investors, Dr. Maya. So one, I would like to know from you, how do you see this space evolving in the recent times? What is it that the investors are now looking at when it comes to ESG? If you could highlight a few, factors for us. And two, what percentage of investors do you think are looking into this aspect now, and how is this going to change or evolve in the next 4 to 5 years?
Yeah, no, I think investors on all levels are looking at this and looking at the ESG. For ESG, it's just looking at what strategies and what they're putting in. Reporting is so important now. Full transparency for organizations. So it will be important for startups to look at how they're going to be transparent within theirs. I mean, we're looking at diversity and inclusion here in the US, it is one of the top elements of where you need to start reporting and where that equality is and what is the diversity within your corporation and what you're doing. On the environmental side, from procurement of who you're engaging with and what is that voice that you are doing, from philanthropy of where you are as an organization and how you're giving back and taking care of the communities externally and internally into your organization. What are those strategies, and how is that data? Because data is so important for you to be collecting. So how do you embed that data collection and being able to communicate that out to your investors or whatever investors that you want to reach? Like, here's what we're planning. So it is, and how your governance is, how you're taking care of your people. What are you doing for both internally and governance externally, to even what you are holding to your subcontractors. All of those things are now being asked by investors, and you have reporting on all fronts, from GRESB on real estate side, you have SASB and GRI, all kinds of reporting that is being asked for. So what kind of reporting is best for you within your industry and where you want to go to be able to be transparent about it. So it's building those strategies. It is so important for that transparency now, because and that reporting aspect. So that data collection needs to be embedded into your overall startup philosophies as well, and strategies, because those have to be reported. They are now becoming a necessity. If you look at any larger organization's website, they're starting to putting these metrics on their website for where they stand, and it's both for bringing in talent, retaining talent, as well as investors.
So I think, it's good that you mentioned about some of these global standards that investors are now expecting the companies to follow. And that, again, I think is a sort of space that is evolving, that needs to be, there are certain things which need to be more robust in terms of standardization and uniformity across the globe, across different sectors. That is also perhaps something which causes this sort of resistance in the companies, because there isn't one uniform standard being followed or being asked for from investors and larger clients, and that leads to a lot of confusion. What is it that I should be following? What is it that is best for me? And for someone just starting out on their journey, that's a very pertinent question to answer, because they obviously don't want to start reporting on 10 different standards. So that's also something that we are helping a lot of companies with, to first of all to identify what is right for them. Don't try to do everything at once. Probably go for the things which are more holistic at first, more broader in nature, and also most applicable to your particular sector or locations or geography where you're operating in. And since there isn't one single standard as of now, which can be implemented across the board, a combination of 2 or 3 standards seems to be the best option. But having said that, even authorities, regulatory organizations are coming up with, they also understand this challenge, and they're coming up with more holistic standards now. Like, for example, there's TCFD for climate action, then there is BRSR in India, business responsibility and sustainability reporting. So some standardization, I'm sure, will happen within a year or 2. But until then, there is a combination that we have to look at, a hybrid sort of approach.
As a startup start thinking about that, there are metrics that can be utilized, or at least starting to look at being embedded for all environmental, social, and governance aspects, for that data to be collected, that can be reported on multiple reporting standards, because they all follow the same very similar requests that is being put out there. And then, like, if you make sure that you're going to science-based metrics and then moving from there, I think they'll be safe as they grow and start evolving.
Absolutely, yes. So I think we are much better off today than we were, say, 5 years ago, where companies were just going on a public platform and announcing that they will be carbon neutral in 10 years or 15 years without really knowing if that is something achievable or something applicable even for their company. But now with science-based targets, you have a methodology to this, madness or whatever you may want to call it. So Robinder, anything you'd like to add there?
Oh, I'm going to try and demystify this a bit. So for the sake of the viewers who I'm guessing are more on the startup mode and don't really have the knowledge, if you like, of what are science-based targets, what is GRI, what is reporting, etc., etc. I'm going to try and mystify this into two buckets. Okay, I've been meeting investors now for over 20 years, global investors on different money markets. So whether in the private equity side, the VC side, the public market side, the bonds, the fixed income side, the equity side, and of course bankers. And if you look at the journey on that 20 years, 10 years ago, it was more a tick box item. Do you report on sustainability? Yes, I do. Fine. Will you pass the the gate into becoming a organization that we can invest into, and if you don't, then we look at you differently. That said, one has to be cognizant of the fact that investors have multiples of investment opportunities. So as an organization, as a startup, you have to be one of those that actually become eligible for that investment, because funding is key to any business. And more often than not, you start young as a startup. You're not going to go public day one. So you're going to start at different levels of investment pool. So whether you're dealing with private equity funds or VCs, or even dealing with banks or mezzanine funds, institutions that are lending to the small and medium enterprises, you must understand what they are being exposed to and what they are expecting of you. One key as element of that is being able to identify key areas of measurement, so that you actually agree that, okay, on my energy conservation, I'm going to do X, Y, Z over a predefined timetable. And that predefined timetable, nobody is expecting it to be tomorrow, day after tomorrow. It is a timetable that goes on over a period of years, number one. Number two, a lot of these targets are very flexible. A lot of these targets should be flexible enough so that as you evolve as an organization, you're able to modify them. But capturing the data is very, very sensible advice. Secondly, it's no longer a tick box item, and it's no longer a tick box item because investors who are investing into these PE funds or into these VC funds are expecting those investments to go into organizations that are compliant or that are investing into ESG. So they are being compelled. Financiers are being compelled because of pressure from their clients to invest in companies that are investing in ESG. So you stand a better chance, if you like, all things being equal, of actually getting funding more successfully and perhaps even at a better rate than others, simply because you've decided to take that step forward and are showing the right and are willing to make the investments in the right direction insofar as ESG is concerned. One of the biggest issues with that financiers have with startups in particular is the area of governance. So, whether it is transparency, whether it is about, related party transactions, whether it is about disclosures, whether it is about the board construct, all of these things are very elementary to building a good, foundation, if you like, of governance. And again, these don't require incremental investments. It just requires a philosophy at that level to say that, look, I'm willing to understand or I'm willing to go through that process of making sure that I don't do certain business practices that may have been okay or acceptable or passable, if you like, under the radar of the regulators, but is no longer acceptable. And we are seeing that. I mean, I just as an example, in India, we see every other day, sadly, many of the unicorns, going through a serious issue, not on the business front, not on their governance, but being impacted significantly due to poor governance. And that's an area that is very easy to invest in, but requires commitment, requires, again, while Maya is absolutely right that ESG is top down and bottoms up, but there is no bottoms up in a startup, right? Because it's all about the promoter and it's all about what he or she is willing to do in that organization and how they want to construct that organization that makes a difference. In a nutshell, for a startup, as far as investors are concerned, you stand a much better chance and you stand a chance to get better quality of funding upfront. And that makes a big difference, right? Because if your borrowing costs comes down by even 20 basis points or 30 basis points, as compared to others in the same business, you have a very compelling business case ahead of you, because that's the incremental leverage you have in the marketplace. And everybody wants that incremental leverage irrespective of.
Yeah, and it's very well put, Robinder. So one thing that everyone needs to realize is that it's not just the tangible benefits we should be looking into when it comes to ESG. There are so many intangible benefits which are perhaps completely sidelined when we perhaps pay too much focus on cost saving and business benefits of it. So long-term sustainability of the business itself is ensured through ESG. And while there are so many aspects that businesses would learn about, would start looking into once they start understanding the ESG framework, there are also a lot of realizations that happen along the way where, the top management of the company would realize that there are things that they are doing already, which they may not have done for an ESG purpose, but they may be following certain good practices already, and they fall under the umbrella of ESG. And hence, all that is needed is a complete framework, to consolidate all of it in one place. So you have a clear picture of what the company's vision is, and how do you bring everything together, whether it is in terms of your economics, your business strategy, your sustainability strategy, your social strategy in terms of your human resources, as well as community benefit, for the larger society. And how do you communicate this? That's equally important. I think communication is also a very important element of this entire puzzle that is completely missed out on. And again, it comes from the conventional thinking that you need not talk about the good you're doing, which is so not okay in today's times. So you have to talk about it. You have to inform your internal and external stakeholders why they should be associated with you. So yeah, so that's also something that the startups also probably can ingrain, in their philosophy right from the beginning. So, well, I think one thing is established now across the board, that ESG is essential. There is no doubt about it, even for the startups. And in fact, it's easier for the startups to implement because they don't have to redo the whole thing 5 years down the line. If their systems are already ESG compliant, it requires very little effort to follow it for many, many years. Let's talk a little bit about how ESG encourages innovation or change management within an organization.
I mean, as a startup, I don't know if change management can be fully implemented here. I think as a startup, when you're building it, you want to build in innovation. You want to build in agility for where you are. And making sure, again, within top down, bottom up, all your people, right? So if you're a startup, you're a few people, or, you're small, you're still a small set, like all your people you want them to be able to be agile. And that's where change management even comes in, right? Where agility of, they see the market is changing or transforming, or regulations coming down the line, or they want to start expansion into other cities, states, or where they are, looking at regulations and being able to adapt their systems or what they do for those to come in. So that agility, and that's where change management innovation comes in. So that needs to be built into the initial foundations of the business strategy as you're building your business plans and as you're looking to evolve and change. So that change management mentality of being able for that adaptability, business agility will also lead to innovation. So that that you need to have collaboration, you need to have buy-in all the way through, from top to down, like bottom up, for what the main the vision and the goals of that organization are. And you want to have your team that is going out and listening, and maybe your foot soldiers that are everywhere coming back with those ideas, what the competition is doing, or how you can improve your process, what, like, even maybe from a different sector, you can bring that, what another sector is doing, bringing that into your organization and being able to embed it into it as you move forward. So I think it's very important to have that change management mentality and built into that, and that agility, because that's how you're going to be able to disseminate anything coming into that needs to happen within your organization.
Robinder, anything you would like to add?
No, I think, these are areas, whether you are an agile organization, whether you encourage innovation, whether you encourage agility, whether you encourage, whatever you do, transparency, etc. I think there are, our core audience today is startups. And so really they don't have anything to change because they are still in the process of setting up what they want to set up going forward. So to that extent, they have the luxury, if you like, of really creating a culture of an organization that works for them. And when I say it works for them, obviously it has to work for their 360-degree ecosystem, which includes their customers, their suppliers, their potential employees, and so on and so forth, their financiers and so on. So I think the big advantage, and I'm just trying to tie in this whole aspect of should a startup look at ESG from the word go, is that philosophy of ESG encompasses many, many elements of business strategies and of the culture around the organization. What it also does very cleverly, if you like, and if you invest in it smartly, is that it helps create an open ecosystem that encourages communication, that encourages two-way, dialogue. Very small things, very, very small things like whistleblower policy. I'm just giving that as an example. Is a fantastic tool that encourages employee retention. It encourages employee ability to recruit. It reduces your cost of recruitment, but at the same time, it increases the business ecosystem from a governance standpoint. But it also creates an atmosphere or a culture, if you like, of transparency and sharing, where everybody is saying that, look, I'm as invested in this business, or I'm committed to this business as much as the next guy or the promoter is. Even though I may not have equity in the game, I still have boots on the game, and therefore I am as much a stakeholder as the next guy. So I think investing in ESG has the advantage of creating that cultural organization, which is the softer part of what you were talking about, Anu, earlier, and those are non-financial, perhaps non-tangible in the initial part, but very measurable from its impact on performance as you go forward, and the kind of organization that you create going forward. So I think it's a very key element to driving an organization towards becoming nimble, or driving an organization towards becoming transparent, or driving an organization towards encouraging innovation and sharing of ideas and best practices, etc. Because you're a new organization. That said, you got to understand again that this is a startup ecosystem. They have their set of priorities well laid out, as they should, and business becomes a very critical imperative in there. So that's why, to me, the softer advantages will follow as a consequence, but can't be the reason for the business itself, can't be the reason or the business case for the investment in itself. So we have to be able to demonstrate to people that, look, there is a fungible, tangible, measurable advantage that you get as a startup by focusing on ESG, because as you go through that journey, you will start to see many intangibles come through incrementally as well, which will reflect in your organization going forward in any case. To a businessman who's going to put sweat equity and real equity into the table, he wants to see what's in it for the organization in a measurable manner. Sometimes that measurables may not be financial; they may be other metric as well. But he wants to see it as measurable as can, because for him, the touchy-feely, the good, feel-good factor is great, but it's not the reason why he's doing the business to begin with.
You can measure when you're looking at ESG. You can measure, like, it's not just when you're looking at money. Now we are looking at, it is measurable. It's not touchy-feely. It is more about how you're building your HR system. how you are building your policies and what policies you're putting into place, how you are communicating it of where you stand in your vision and what your organization stands for is part of all of that. And now it will attract not only investors, it will attract customers, it will attract employees. All of these things are very tangible, and you can easily put the financials with it.
Right.
So it is not a touchy-feely type of thing. I think it is a necessity within your business strategy and building your business foundations.
Very much.
I think we can all agree on the fact that it's not just financial benefit that is related to ESG, and that perhaps also makes ESG so much more easier to adopt for organizations, because this is very, very objective parameters we are talking about. It's mostly measurable. Even the softer issues are measurable and clearly linked to business. So otherwise, if it wasn't, why would organization spend millions of dollars on branding, communications, marketing? The only thing which is missing in this entire puzzle is the fact that all of your ESG initiatives also contribute towards your branding, your marketing, your social position within the society, and how you're perceived as a company, as a responsible company globally. So I think one takeaway for anyone from this discussion is certainly that, no doubt about the fact ESG is essential for startups to look at, and in fact, a very, very good idea to look at right from the beginning. And perhaps two other conclusions I would draw from today's discussion is you must get the why right. Don't do it just because everybody's doing it or everybody's talking about it, but understand what does ESG mean for you specifically, for your organization, why you should do it. And the moment you answer the why, you would also know what is it that you need to do immediately, and what is it that you could aim for perhaps a few years down the line. So you don't have to do everything in one go. You have to have, just like a business strategy, a business plan, you have to have an ESG plan, and you must have an incremental and continual improvement approach towards this, rather than doing everything in one go. Even after spending 21 years in the domain, I still haven't done everything. I still haven't learned everything. And I'm sure the same, Maya and Robinder would agree with me on that. So it's such a rapidly evolving field. There is always something new happening, new innovations coming in, new ways of doing business that you would have to change with the changing scenario. Globally, everybody's evolving in this space, and we have to just be ready for that change to happen. So thank you very much, Robinder and Maya, for this very interesting discussion. So thank you very much to my elite panelists for this very interesting discussion. I really enjoyed talking to you. So for our DLC community, just to let you all know, at Sustain Plus, my firm, we provide all kinds of end-to-end solutions under ESG and climate action. And no matter at what stage you are in your ESG journey, please do reach out with any questions you may have, any kind of support you may need in terms of your ESG, identifying your ESG strategy, focus areas, building a roadmap or an action plan, or implementing certain specific projects or solutions, say, be it net zero, carbon neutrality, be it reporting or disclosures in DJSI or CDP, or I would not go into the details of what all of these mean, but if you are looking into the ESG space, I'm sure at some point you would come across these global standards. So do reach out for any support you need in implementing these standards or reporting and disclosing under these standards. So we would be happy to help you. At Sustain Plus, we have these three verticals under corporate social responsibility, ESG, and climate action.
Hi, everybody. So M3D Consulting I work as an advisor and a partner for anybody that is looking into embedding ESG into their organization and what strategies they need to do, how to improve their communications internally, externally, rebranding, really looking at process and optimization of that process and what needs to happen. So I work as an advisor to even startups. As a social entrepreneur, I've really focused on small to mid-sized businesses and helping them transition. I've been in this industry for over 20 years and just really work as a partner for these teams and really look at your services, how you're communicating it, what process needs to happen internally, and really look as that guide and that partner for you for those needs and helping you map out what exactly that might look like for your specific sector and where that vision is. So I really work closely as an advisor and partner on that stuff within my firm. So I look forward to hearing from you. Please do come to me and ask me questions. I'm also an educator, so I also create workshops and facilitate other types of things as well. So I look holistically at the needs of the client and we'll work with them on what those things are, just within same realms of NU, but more on an advisory support and helping maybe your team become those experts to lead those initiatives.
Thank you. It's a difficult act to follow after what you guys have presented. Well, I'm just a person with over 3 decades of experience, having done this in both small, medium, and large organizations, where we have gone through the journey of accepting at a board level the logic and the rationale, presenting business cases for the investments in a timely manner, being able to set up right from scratch the function for the organization, including help in the policy framework, but also in the vision, mission, the values, and being able to help integrate that into the overall vision, mission, and values of the organization. And then, of course, being able to implement some of the plans or help implement some of the plans. My biggest turn on, if you like, is to not do what I know how to do, but to train people in your organization or to train or mentor, if you like, individuals in your organization who can then become champions in their own right. So I'm more than happy to work alongside the relevant people within organizations to firstly communicate the value system and the value proposition, but also then identify or help identify individuals who can then become the champions within your organization for ESG as you go forward. So that's really the role I play, and I like to play, if you like. My details are fairly public, so you can reach me. You can look me up through LinkedIn or any of the public profiles, and I'm sure you can get in touch with the DLC organization, who will be happy to push your request further on to me. But thank you very much again to the team at DLC for putting this together. Very useful conversation, very encouraging conversation. I'm happy to understand that demand is coming bottoms up. So there is actually a requirement being felt within startups to want to do ESG. And if that is indeed the case, then I'm happy to help you in that journey, if you like, of transitioning from where you are today to integrating to hopefully handing over to somebody in the organization just shortening that learning curve, that's all, for the organization and being able to get to best in class. I'm lucky that I've worked with organizations that have done extremely well, including being part of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, including getting the gold, standards from Transparency International, and so on and so forth. So those recognitions will come. I think that's just the outcome rather than the reason why you invest in ESG. Thank you.
Thank you.